everyone, estate planning horror stories, the one where a spouse is not added to the deed. So let's talk about a few of the circumstances in which one of the spouse does not automatically get added to the deed. Number one, let's say that wife inherits a piece of property, land, minerals, a house somewhere from her deceased father. As just the wife is a beneficiary of the deceased father's estate, the deed that gives the wife an interest in that property, or maybe a final order in a probate, only names the wife as the owner, therefore husband is not listed on the deed. Number two, let's say we have a second marriage situation, and let's say the husband brings the house into the marriage, they live there for a long time, but the wife never gets added to the deed. Number three, let's say one of the spouses has a bad credit score and the lender or the bank requires that just one of the spouses gets listed on the deed. Number four, let's say we have a couple who lives out of state. One of the spouses has to move to Oklahoma as soon as possible to start a job, while the other remains in their home state to settle their affairs, sell the house there. In the meantime, the spouse who moved to Oklahoma bought a house and the documents were done just in that spouse's name. Number five, it could be for any reason. Whatever the reasons are that a spouse is not listed on a deed, let's talk about what happens first. Well, if a spouse is not added on the deed, then and something happens to the spouse who is listed on the deed with the sole owner, what it appears to be, then that house will likely have to be probated if there is no estate plan in place. I should mention that there is a difference between being listed on the deed and being listed on the mortgage agreement. Oftentimes, even though you're not listed on the deed, the mortgage company may require both spouses to sign. So how can you find out if you're listed on the deed or if you're listed on the mortgage? I would suggest calling the county assessor. Maybe they can give you that information. You may be able to pull it online, or call the county clerk and say, this is the situation, I just want to make sure that I'm listed on the deed. I should also mention that just because one spouse is not listed on the deed, that doesn't mean that that spouse has no interest in that property. What kind of interest do they have? Well, it all depends. It depends if it's a marital property, as in they live there, that's their residence. It depends if it's separate property. It depends on what kind of funds were used to purchase or to maintain it. It depends on many things, but you can see how that could be so hard to prove, or that could cause some true horror stories in court. Finally, if you are in one of these situations, what are your options? Well, if you want to add your spouse to the deed now, you can do so. It's very simple. Give us a call, we'll talk to you about it. Two, if you don't want to add the spouse to the deed, for whatever reason, you want to keep it separate, or it doesn't make sense, or it's just better that way, whatever your unique situation may be, make sure you have an estate plan in place that addresses exactly what should happen to that property if you die. Ideally, you have a trust that so you can avoid probate, but if you are not ready to get a trust in place, at least get a will and specify what happens to that property, because it can get very messy based on the situation. If you don't have a will in place, maybe giving everything to your spouse may not receive the entire interest of the property, which may or may not be what you want, and that's fine. But make sure you have something in writing that makes it very easy as to prevent any conflict in your family, ideally to prevent going through courts. I hope this video answered some of your questions. Be sure to give me a call if you have any questions, 405-857-8231. Like our Facebook page, watch our other estate planning horror stories and educational videos, and maybe even attend one of our in-person free estate planning lunch and learns. We have one coming up soon. We have them once a month. We would love to meet you. Thank you for watching.